Breaking news now, the United States has gotten involved in the conflict between Israel and Iran. President Trump says the U.S. military struck 3 sites in Iran, directly joining Israel's effort to decapitate the country's nuclear program.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
Over the last 12 hours, we saw quite the news cycle. The United States confirmed precision airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. President Trump came out and addressed the nation, stating that the mission was very successful. But the immediate question on everyone's mind is, how will Iran respond? Iranian leaders have already warned of retaliation, raising fears that tonight's attack could ignite a broader regional or even global conflict. But despite the turmoil, Bitcoin is holding remarkably steady around $102,000, showing only minor intraday swings, while traditional markets brace for Monday's open. In this video, we will break down possible Iranian counter moves, as well as US forces moving into the region. We'll also look at Bitcoin's future outlook with Paul Sampson, our TA specialist, as well as some hopium for Bitcoin moving forward. If you're tracking market security or just trying to make sense of an increasingly uncertain world, stay right here, hit that subscribe button, and let's unpack what could be the most consequential night of 2025. All right, guys, so jumping right into the news, President Trump, like mentioned, did address the nation, stating that the attacks were very successful and that they worked hand in hand with Israel to make them happen. He did mention that they do not want further strikes to occur and they want this to be a one and done situation, but it really will be determined if Iran retaliates or not. Iran, through state television, and is already stating that they are planning to retaliate. Now, of course, that is state television, and we have to really wait to hear that directly from leadership. But that is the big question and concern. We have to also understand that Iran does have a handful of moves in play here. Now, will all of them be a smashing success, or really any of them? Probably not. But they can cause enough issue to really make this a much larger regional conflict than it currently is. Right now, the United States has roughly a dozen or more military bases in the region, as well as 3 carrier strike groups in the region as well. Collectively, over 40,000 personnel are in the Middle East right now. So a significant United States military buildup in the region, and also a lot of targets for Iran to hit. So we need to, of course, hope none of that comes into fruition. This is a statement President Trump posted here on X, saying that any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with forces far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Now, again, as of now, it doesn't necessarily seem that this is a declaration of war. Now, Congress ultimately has to make that decision if they want to declare war on Iran. Maybe we can get away with 1 strike, and this leads us to the negotiation table, but we will, of course, just have to wait and see. What we need to really worry about with this whole situation is something we touched on last week when we put out a breaking news episode on this topic, is the global oil trade route that passes right by Iran. About 20% of all global trade flows through the Strait of Hormuz. And this was a post we made last week showing that Polymarket had a 38% chance that Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz in 2025. This has recently spiked to 55% last night because of the situation with the United States. Now, let's really break down how significant this is. 21 million barrels of oil flow through the Strait of Hormuz daily. 20% of global oil supply. About 90% of Saudi and 96% of Iraqi exports would also be stuck because of this closure. This is a significant Strait for global economy, global trade routes. If this happens, we will see this ripple across every single industry in the globe. And, you know, to be real, if Iran even attempted this, I'm sure the United States and other nations, even other Middle Eastern nations, would quickly jump in militarily and make sure that this shipping route remains open and clear of any sort of military action. This is a brief overview showing just how active this trade route is. And here's another map showing the actual scale of this. This is showing different canals and straits around the globe. And the Strait of Hormuz is the second largest in the world when it comes to funneling global oil through, about 21 million barrels per day, with the Strait of Malacca being the largest at 24 million barrels per day. This is a big deal. And we also have to keep in mind that, you know, this isn't just the Middle Eastern economy that would be affected. China gets a significant amount of oil from Iran through the Strait of Hormuz and, of course, through the Strait of Malacca. So if oil gets affected with Iran as well, although they could maybe send it through land routes, China and, as we know, China and Russia are allies with Iran, but specifically China could really end up wanting to step in because of that action as well. So that's something that Iran probably wouldn't want to utilize as one of their chips on the table, but it is something that we really need to pay attention to, and I think is the biggest concern at this point. Next up, I want to pivot course from all the war talk, guys, and I want to really look at the bigger picture here for Bitcoin specifically. You know, we see these big events happening around the globe. It seems at a much more consistent pace nowadays, but we need to understand that these events are really pushed out in the media, especially to spike fear, to spike sell pressure in certain markets. And right now, we are still seeing nothing but positive sentiment in the Bitcoin market, in the Bitcoin community as a whole. Just today, unfortunately, it completely got drowned out because of the situation happening over in Iran. But Texas officially passed and signed into law their strategic Bitcoin reserve. This is amazing news. They are now the third state in the United States to have a Bitcoin reserve officially in law. Now, let me emphasize how great this is. These are the other states as well, Arizona and New Hampshire. Texas is considered the 8th largest economy in the world. They have a GDP of roughly $2.1 trillion. So does that correlate specifically to this Bitcoin reserve? Of course not. But just looking at this from a broader perspective, if you have the United States looking to adopt Bitcoin federally and have a reserve, and then you start having all these other states have reserves as well, with Texas being one of them, considered to be the 8th largest economy in the world, we are likely going to see a rapid shift globally towards taking Bitcoin much more seriously. The world is taking notice, guys, and we of course have seen it in the past with El Salvador jumping on the bandwagon much earlier and doing their absolute best to capitalize on all the benefits that Bitcoin has to offer, not just as a reserve currency asset or a safe haven asset, but looking at how it benefits the country as a whole, how many jobs it brings, how much, how it literally banks the unbanked, especially in El Salvador, where they launched so many programs giving out free phones so people could utilize Bitcoin. All of these things really elevate societies around the globe. And of course, we see significant Bitcoin adoption over in Africa, in that region. But as we see it really ramp up in the United States, all of these first world countries are really going to have no choice but to adopt Bitcoin or be left behind. Now let's go ahead and jump into some Bitcoin technical analysis to get a little more of a macro view of where we currently stand with Bitcoin and where we will likely be headed in the foreseeable future. Paul, our TA specialist here on DataDash, is going to give us a little bit of an update. This is something he released on the channel about 48 hours ago, but I think it does a phenomenal depiction of where we are likely headed in the short term, especially with this news coming out last night. It is looking much more likely where he thinks we are headed to the low $90,000 range for Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and give it a listen.
Bitcoin is pretty much remaining relatively sideways here, which we've been in for quite some time. And I want to just kind of start with pretty much that higher time frame setup that we've been hammering on for quite a few weeks now at this point. And to put it simply, it really does still just remain this overall setup. And at the highest level right now, this truly is the most valid setup that I still do really lean on the most, especially while we're kind of trading in this sideways momentum here. Now, I will kind of point out the potential for a move where we actually come back up towards these highs. Usually that's known as a short squeeze, and we'll kind of touch on that here in a bit. But overall, just still really remaining relatively neutral here. I think that the idea is still truly that we came up, we formed this bearish shark is the setup, is what is known as. It's a harmonic pattern, which is a sequence of Fibonacci's, which we've covered quite a few times. I don't want to bore you too much with it today, but overall, basically, this is a setup where we come down and we take the lows. All right, we came down lower than this area here. You come all the way back up to the highs. You end up effectively taking out the highs, right? You come into this region. We had a completion zone up between basically 108,000 to 114,000. And we were even looking for a specific time frame, which we were targeting all the way back when we were trading in this region here, which was for the end of May. So everything really has lined up relatively nice for this. The overall target zone still does remain this region down here, about $88,000 to $93,000. I think that the negative news catalyst around us right now, could very well be something that propels the price action into that region. So at the moment, that's still really the overall thesis. And even if we were to see a push up first, the overall drawdown to this region is what I've been heavily anticipating for quite some time here. Okay. And I do actually look to this region as a huge area of opportunity for us to come down to. We would effectively be knocking out many, many people in the market. On top of that, I do imagine that there would be a good amount of fear going on. I'm sure that the news would not be too exciting. Realistically, from where we are right this moment, it's only about a 10% drop to that region. Unfortunately, that would not be a great time for the altcoins. But this area, I do believe, offers up a really unique opportunity for whether it's the buying opportunity for many that have missed this rally to the upside alone in Bitcoin. It's going to more than likely bring down altcoins to areas where people may deem them as pretty valuable as well. And while by no means can I predict what the market is going to do, I truly do foresee that region being the area where if we're going to break this range sizably to the upside, meaning this overall region we've been in Bitcoin for the last few months, I do foresee us needing to pull back just a little bit more into those key regions, hit those target areas. Once again, the fear is probably going to be a little high. News is going to be extreme at those areas. And then from there, we would look for the strength to come back in, and then a next leg higher overall in Bitcoin, which in turn is going to mean for the overall market, I imagine the stocks and traditional markets would come with it.
Thank you, Paul, as always, for the exceptional TA. Overall, guys, I think we have a very bright future ahead. I know it's very easy to get caught up in the news cycle and see these very doom and gloom sort of situations like we saw yesterday. Hopefully, let's hope that this does not escalate into a much larger global conflict, because that will do nothing but cause mayhem for everyone and all markets across the board. But I do want us to have a pretty good takeaway for this video. And I think the takeaway is that we cannot let these sort of big events steer us from our path of what we are focused on doing here. And that, for most of us, is accumulating Bitcoin, stacking those sats, and really growing our portfolios with as much time as we have left. We are seeing institutions really ramp up their infrastructure for Bitcoin. We thought it was finished when the ETF craze really kicked off when it came to adoption. But I think we have a long way to go. Really around only 14% of the globe has touched cryptocurrency as a whole. And we are just seeing institutions like JP Morgan Chase finally offering Bitcoin services to its retail investors. And they are the first of many. We just had the Genius Act pass in Congress or in Senate. And that is going to bring stablecoin infrastructure majorly to the United States in a big way. And that can ripple greatly across the globe and really tie back in to the crypto market. But I think today and yesterday was a phenomenal depiction of how Bitcoin has matured. It has really grown up and showed us that in times of conflict and uncertainty, it can remain as a relatively stable asset. I mean, we saw a couple $1,000 move. That's nothing. I don't know about you guys, but I remember negative 30% days. Those were the fun times looking back at it. But overall, I do want to leave us with this. This is a post that I saw on X that I think does a phenomenal depiction of where we currently are at and where we're going. And I know it might be a little corny to some, but it gave me chills nonetheless, because at least for myself, I've been in this industry since 2017. I've seen the growth. We used to get excited over the littlest things like PayPal potentially getting in the industry. And now stuff like Texas making Bitcoin a strategic reserve, nobody cares. It's pretty crazy. So let me go ahead and read this to you guys. From whole coiners to Satoshi millionaires. The whole coiner era is almost over. We're entering the phase where the average person won't be able to own a full Bitcoin ever again. Satoshi millionaires will be the new obtainable chase. Most people won't realize it until it's way too late. A lot of you holding a full coin right now probably don't think much of it, but mark my words, when this bull run hits, most of you will sell. You convince yourself it's life-changing money and walk away. And sure, it might be, but one day people are going to look back and say, wow, you had a whole Bitcoin. Just like we laughed at the guy who spent 10,000 BTC on pizza. If you've got one, maybe keep it. Just one. Long term, you really don't understand what's happening yet. Wow. I think that is very, very accurate. We are maybe in the 6th inning, maybe the 5th. We have a long way to go, guys. And, I don't want this statement I just read to solely resonate with people with whole Bitcoins. I'm sure a lot of us watching this are still working up to that amount. If you have 1/10 of a Bitcoin, that is a phenomenal accomplishment. Overall, though, keep working towards whatever your goal might be. All of us have different goals. All of us have different lives and visions of what we want to be able to utilize this Bitcoin for someday. Maybe you want to take it to the grave or give it to your kids, whatever it may be. It is up to you. That is your decision to make. But the point is, let's not let these events deviate us from the bigger goal. We've gotten through so many more ugly things in the past. We got through the whole COVID phase, and we saw how great of an opportunity that ended up being if you look back at it. This may just be another one of those situations. And right now, Bitcoin's not fazed at all by this situation happening over in the Middle East. But if this does expand, if we do see other countries get involved, if this ends up being an opportunity for China to make strategic moves on Taiwan or whatever it may be, things can get pretty dicey pretty quick, and we can see things turn south. But as always, make sure you do not act in the moment off of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Make sure you think clearly when it comes to big decisions like pulling the trigger on selling your Bitcoin or even pulling the trigger on buying Bitcoin. Overall, it is up to you. None of this is ever financial advice, but we do need to take away that time is running out and this train is not waiting for anyone. Not you, not myself, nobody. So let's make sure we are positioned accordingly, because everyone watching this video right now, to the end especially, deserve to capitalize on all the beautiful benefits that Bitcoin and the entire industry as a whole has to offer. If you found this video informative, let me know by leaving a like and a comment down below. What are your thoughts on this conflict over in the Middle East? Do you see expanding into something much larger? What are your thoughts on Bitcoin right now? Do you see us diving lower into the low 90s like Paul thinks we will be going to? Let me know down below. Thank you guys as always for watching, and I'll catch you in the next.